Thank you very much. And it's a pleasure to be here. And I'm excited to bring you this presentation on the seasons of growth. I'm going to give you a little overview here. A little bit about my background, and then I'll talk about the growth mindset. What is it? And let's get a kind of a good understanding of it. And then we'll move into the seasons of growth. And then some aspects that contribute to growth, which are important. And then we'll end the presentation on character strengths. And if time, I'll talk a little bit about Coach John Wooden's Pyramid of Success, which if you don't know about that, I'll at least give you an introduction where you can do some research yourself on it. Okay, my background, if you can see over to the side, my identity is a fighter pilot. 23 years flying jets in the Air Force. And then I transitioned to the airlines, and I had some overlap in there, flying with the Air National Guard and with the airlines. I'm also a general aviation instructor pilot. I'm a glider pilot, seaplane pilot. The point is, I'm not just one kind of pilot. I've developed myself through the growth mindset. To include going and getting a doctorate degree in sports psychology. I started out, if last week you were here with Ford, Dr. Ford Dyke at Auburn University was my professor, and he's a mentor of mine. He's younger than me. He's probably old enough to be, or young enough to be one of my kids, but nonetheless, he's a mentor. And we'll talk a little bit about mentorship later. But I went back to school using my VA benefits after having a bicycle wreck on an airline layover in Chile, and I'm waiting to go back to flying again. So I embraced this opportunity and adversity and went back and got another degree, and that led me to Ford and then to this organization. So that's how we hooked up. So bicycle wrecks are not necessarily a bad thing. But throughout my career, we're always striving for performance excellence. This is an F-16. This is what I did for the majority of my career. Millions of dollars of training. You had to be fully committed to the process. And it had life and death consequences. It wasn't just about winning and losing. It was about living and dying and not dying. And I saw 3 accidents occur with F-16s and the fireballs. And I've lost friends along the way. So sports psychology was something that I embraced to live, okay, versus just win. But let's get right into the growth versus fixed mindsets, and then I'll talk a little bit more about how this relates to my background and see if there's any transferability to your sport as an athlete or coach or as a teacher. The growth mindset, Stanford professor Dr. Carol Dweck is the one who wrote the book called Mindset, and it's a great book. I suggest everyone take a look at this book if you can. I highly recommend it. But on the screen, and I'll click to the next slide because I can see it better. The growth mindset sees opportunity and adversity. It sees setbacks and obstacles as a way to improve. Yes, you have to have thick skins because sometimes criticism from the coach can kind of cut deep. But the growth mindset individual doesn't see it as an attack. It's not an attack on their self-esteem, okay? Whereas the fixed mindset person is like, I'm gifted, I'm naturally, an athlete, and yeah, I do my thing, and I don't have to listen to anyone, okay? They're gonna pretty much remain where they are. Yeah, they'll get probably up to their capability, but they will not fully reach their potential that they could have been, okay? And, on TV lately, there's been all the stuff about Michael Jordan. And in this book, she talks about Michael Jordan. He had been cut from his team in high school, and that he's one of the hardest working athletes. He embraces that growth mindset. And yes, there's a lot of vanity that can come with it. And the growth mindset can make you so good that you get to a level where you can almost become your own god, to where, you know, you think you're it. And you see this happen in sports, in politics, in business. You see people just accelerate to the top and then they go off the deep end for something really stupid. Okay. So the growth mindset has its limitation there, that it can make you really, really, really good. Okay. So we embrace challenge. We see setbacks as an opportunity, just like I did going back and getting another degree while I was out from flying. It sees effort as the path versus just natural ability. And you learn from criticism. So that's the basics to it. Another analogy is to take a look at Christmas trees. On the left side of the screen is an artificial tree. It already comes with the lights. You just take it out of the box, set it up, pull the branches out. It's easy. It's the easy way out. Okay, that's the fixed mindset person. It's just natural. Hey, it's just easy for me. Whereas on the right, that's a natural tree that's growing. Let's just say it's still in the ground. It's out in your front yard, for example. It's a lot of work. You have to fertilize it. You got to pull the weeds. You got to go put the lights on and try to get them right. It's not going to be perfect looking. And you got to trim it up. Now, if I trim the tree, the artificial tree, it's not going to grow back. Matter of fact, my wife would have me probably throw it out if I cut some branches off. The one on the right, the natural tree, you prune it, it's going to grow back stronger. It's going to grow back with more branches. And that's how you get it to grow correctly. You got to prune it. Well, pruning hurts. When someone clips a branch on your body, when the coach yells at you, when there's criticism, when the fans are yelling at you or whatever, or you become injured and now you've got to recover from that, that hurts. Even deliberate practice hurts, but you got to keep pushing and realize that when you are pruned, you're going to become stronger and you're going to have more branches branch out. Okay, let's relate this to flying jets in the Air Force versus just sitting there droning in an airliner. We were always growth oriented. We were striving for improvement. We had long briefings. We had really long debriefs. A 1-hour flight in an F-16 could be a 12-hour day of preparation and briefing and then debriefing. It was very competitive, but yet it was a lot of teamwork going on. It was a lot of intrinsic motivation, which is coming from yourself, that passion, that drive that comes from that self-satisfaction. And I got a lot of self-satisfaction. Even after a bad sortie in the F-16, you know, I'm flying the hottest jet in the world. I mean, it's a sports car and it's unbelievable power, and it's physically demanding and mentally demanding and even spiritually demanding at times. There was no autopilot. There was no sitting around. There was very few idle moments. Whereas you get in the airlines, it's like, okay, it's about making money. It's extrinsic. That's when you get paid to be a sports athlete. It's when you get paid or you get a scholarship in college. And so you're going to have a little bit different motivation, but there has to be a good blend there too, because you can't work for free over here, you know, flying F-16s, but yet in the airlines, it's all about making money. And the company's about making money, you're about making money, and you sit a lot and you're an automation manager, okay? And so you're not really striving to get any better because there's not much else that I can do to get better. Whereas flying the F-16, you're dropping bombs, shooting missiles, and you're trying to get better, and you're trying to beat your buddy, you know, either in a dogfight or going out and dropping bombs. This is just another cool picture. And we were talking about flow last week and how those contrails are flowing off the wings. Is that flow that happens. Excuse me one second. But you always had to be prepared and you always had to anticipate the next moment while you were in the moment. So that's really what I call being ahead of the moment. I'll talk more about that as I go along. Okay. There was a lot of attention to detail. We were always being evaluated. Here's a grade book just from the F-16 training. It was in a thick binder. And every one of these grade sheets is handwritten in detail. And it was millions of dollars of training. And throughout your career, you were always evaluated and graded to make you better. And that's what we call being athlete-centered. In the airlines, the FAA dictates everything, okay? And you go in, you pass your simulator check. You don't know how you did. You just know I passed. And the instructor writes into the computer, hey, we need to change this or that. So it's more that instructor-centered. And so athlete-centered versus coach-centered, it's all about the athlete and trying to make that person better and what they're good at. Okay, not what you want them to be good at, but making them stronger in what they're good at. There's a lot of teamwork. It was about advancing and striving to improve. And you were always correcting. I say, if you don't know where you're at right now and where you're going, you need to know that first. But then, are you getting the results that you want along the way? Are you maintaining that position exactly where you want it to be? I mean, you got to be constantly changing the process. Don't fall in love with a plan. You got to have a plan, a starting point, but then the plan has got to be adaptable, and you always got to be making small adjustments. Otherwise, you're not going to get the results that you want or that you could have. We talk a lot about situational awareness. That's a mindfulness. It's paying attention on purpose. And you got to know the relevant past applied to the current moment in order to facilitate the future that you want in the next few seconds. So you really own that future. So, we talk about being in the moment, but while you're in that moment, you need to be ahead of the moment and know what to do to execute, to forecast, because you're so prepared and you've grown so much over the years, step by step, that you have this awareness of everything around you. We knew formations, we knew fuel, we knew threats, altitude, airspeed, everything. We had to be aware of it. We couldn't be channelized on one thing. Channelized attention was the enemy of the fighter pilot. That's when you're so honed in on one thing that you can't see the big picture. It's like tunnel vision. I know I'm talking fast, and I'm glad it's being recorded, and we can go back and look at this later. And that's the big picture about situational awareness. And we call it SA. So you had to have high SA. And in the growth mindset, you've got to understand all the different seasons and understand you cannot always be harvesting. Okay. And we'll get more into that in just one second, but I want to talk quickly about choke. This is an aircraft accident. I was supposed to fly that jet that day, and I switched with the other pilot because the other jet had a targeting pod. And he survived this. He ejected about 1,000 feet above the ground and went into the trees. I thought he was dead. I still had to fly my own jet. Like I said, well, it was about life and death consequences. But yeah, I had to stay alive that day myself. And I was over aroused. My heart was beating. I just saw my buddy eject. I saw the plane hit the ground and burst into this huge fireball. And that's choking. That's the pressure to perform as an athlete can choke. This is the worst case scenario right here. When you lose situational awareness on the basketball court, on the football field, or as a handball athlete, you could choke because you lost that SA and you're not sure where you're at, or you channelized on one thing and lost the big picture. And you have to have contingency plans. Like I said a while ago, you can't fall in love with a plan. You got to have multiple contingencies to deal with, and already have that plan ready to go to execute so that there's no lost time. So the growth minded pilot or athlete is mentally tough. Okay, you hear that buzzword all the time about cognitive resilience and mentally tough. Well, the fixed-minded person is tender-minded. They're going to quit. When things get going too tough, they're going to quit. And every team is probably going to have some or have had some, especially in youth athletics. Some of these kids, they're thinking they're going to be Major League Baseball players when they're 5. And that's good to have that that vision and that desire. But if they are told, you know, that you're just gifted, you're so good, it's the same thing with a kid who's smart. It's like we put them in these gifted programs and say, you're so smart. But then the kid who's in the dumb kids, if you tell them, hey, man, that is great effort that you did, those kids actually in the long term, because of the growth mindset that they have, outperform the smart kid that has the fixed mindset. And that's what Carol DeWitt talks about in this book here, from an education standpoint. And so mentally tough versus tender-minded. And you never hear that tender-minded thing. Cruise, this is the summer season. We'll talk about it in a minute. But this is when you're just kind of just out there looking at sunsets. You know, you're off picking daisies when you should be focused on the moment and in an intense engagement. Okay, and that was what Airline Flying was about. That was fixed. Okay, before I get into the seasons, I'm going to have to talk a little bit about attitude, effort, and focus, which is the controllables. Because right now, you know, you hear a lot of buzzwords and a lot of trite terms. You know, be positive and control what you can control. Well, okay, well, you can control your attitude, effort, and focus. And your attitude has to be committed if you're going to have the growth mindset. It has to be intentional. And good intentions is great. Yeah, that's good intentions, Ned. But being intentional is when you take action, you know, take those words and put them to use, okay, with a relentless drive, okay. And we'll talk about character strengths in a moment, but if you align your character strengths with your goals and your plans, it's just going to supercharge things, okay. Your attitude is going to be reflected in your effort, and it's going to show that you're truly committed, okay. There has to be evidence. If there's no evidence that you're committed, then you're not going to have that drive, and you're not going to have the plan, and it's not going to be written out, and you're not going to have that relentless thing, and it's going to show in your body language as well. Okay, effort. You have control over your effort. You can say, yeah, I'm doing the best I can. Okay, well, what is the evidence that you're doing the best you can? You know, do you have a written plan of action? I was telling Miriam a while ago that my wife had oral cancer a couple of years ago, and I actually wrote these out. You know, I had the processes written down of what she was going to do each day. And then I had the performance milestones, what we were shooting for, and it was handwritten, and we tracked it. Now, my wife's not into sports psychology, but I was doing this as her caretaker. And then I had the outcome, okay? And she's still alive, and that's the ultimate outcome, but you can't focus on the outcome, the scoreboard. If you're looking at the scoreboard and the outcome, then you're not doing the process. You're being distracted. So you have the processes, and then you have the performance milestones to see how you're doing. And then if you're not getting the results you want, then you need to make adjustments to the process so your performance milestones are met so that your outcome will eventually come. And so attitude, effort, and focus. Your focus has to be on the current season. Okay, if you're supposed to be in the winter season now and you're trying to harvest, you're not going to get much. So there's limitations to the growth mindset because you cannot always be harvesting. So you got to think long term. Okay. So thoughts precede action. We talked about that last week with Ford or Dr. Dyke. Actions generate results. Okay. And those results, and I'm going to use what they call SMART goals, but I'm going to use it from a different point of view. You have to have results that are SMART without conflict. Okay. Specific, measurable, action-oriented, realistic without vanity, a hype, and timely. Okay, so that's part of that, something that you can gauge off if you are really committed. Okay. So into the seasons, they don't have to coincide with the actual physical season. And in the slide here, you see that I actually start off with the winter. I had to find that on Google. To find the winter season as the beginning was actually not very common for even finding graphics. And this is about personal growth. It can be as you as an athlete or as a pilot or a businessman or a school teacher or coach or whatever. It's actually kind of a form of periodization that, you know, strength and conditioning folks use. And you know, if you don't have these setbacks in winter seasons, then you might not get the harvest that you want later on. Okay. Just remember, there's no easy season. There's no easy way out. Every season has its challenges. And this is the stock market over here on the right. And this is from like 1982. And if you had stuck with the stock market, then you would probably be really rich at this point after 30 years, because it's long-term growth. Yeah, there's a lot of ups and downs, and you could have lost a lot of money if you would have jumped off early. But there's joy in the journey, okay? It's not just all about the outcome. You have to have joy in this, even when there's ups and downs. I'm a long-distance hiker, and I've been going up the Appalachian Trail for the last 5 years, and I'm almost at the 700-mile point of the 2,000 miles. And there's a lot of valleys and a lot of downhills that hurt your knees. But in that valley is when you find the water. That's when you usually are pitching your tent or finding a shelter that's from the storms. And it's when other people are doing the same. So there's fellowship along the way where you get encouragement. So there's nourishment in the valley. The mountaintops are short-lived. Okay. So that's that joy in the journey. And the outcome is going to be reflected in how well you did your processes. But stick to the plan. Don't let knee-jerk reactions stagnate your growth. Okay, to the winter season. Yeah, I'm kind of long-winded sometimes getting to the point, especially at the 21-minute point. Okay, winter is a required season, guys. And so this could be a winter season that we're in right now with the COVID thing. And it's important to know what to do in the winter, and so that you can have that applied correctly to your plan. This is a good time to reflect, refine things from last year. So you got to know how you did. You know, did you track it? Did you, keep good documents where you can go back and see what you need to do to adjust your processes? And it's time to prepare for growth. Time to start thinking about when you're going to plant in the spring. So you're looking at the weather, you're looking at the almanac, you're researching things from the past that occurred with you, as well as people who work with you or your other friends who are farmers. Okay. Did your plan last year really give you the results you wanted? And so this is where you recalculate things for the next year. I actually got 2 slides for the winter because I think it's probably one of the most important seasons. This is when that pruning occurs. This is when you service your equipment and get it ready, because you don't have time to deal with equipment during the spring and summer, especially the harvest. You get organized, you shift resources and prioritize, figure out what's the most important things to do in this moment. This is the time that athletes work on their mental skills. You don't want to be changing mental skills right in the middle of the season, because then that might impact their results. So this is when you work on the mental side. And just remember, this is part of the process, and you have to trust it, and it's not an obstacle to go around. So you can't say, hey, I'm going to avoid the next winter season and go right to the spring. The spring, this is when everything comes to life. You plant your seeds and things start growing. I mean, the soil is always alive, even in the winter. So there's always growth going on, but the spring you start to see it sprout, and you start seeing green, and there's life. And I want to say you're always planting, no matter the season. It could take 30 years for a seed to finally sprout, because it needed the right water that it hadn't had. Something new hadn't been invented yet that finally occurred, and now that seed sprouts. What I am today could go back 30, 40 years ago, when a school teacher or my high school coach planted something in me. He planted something in me I probably didn't want at the time, and because it hurt. But today, that has come to life. And one of my best friends today is the coach that I hated when I was in high school. He was my wrestling coach. And today, I go and have lunch with him, and we talk about hiking in Spain. It's crazy. So I was telling you a while ago that Dr. Ford was my teacher 4 years ago, and he's like a mentor. There were seeds planted. Either I planted some seeds in his garden, and the same here, that have come to life and brought me here today. Okay, so there's mentorship going on. The summer, this is when you get the most growth, guys. But it also requires that you pull weeds. It requires still a lot of work, and it's hot and a lot more sweat. And if you don't fertilize and you don't pull the weeds, things are going to get choked out. This is when you got to prioritize and focus on really what's important and not get lazy. You know, we always say, hey, just believe, just believe. But if you believe, then you'll do the effort in that season to make it happen with the right blend of motivation, because you got extrinsic and you got intrinsic. And so there's got to be a blending of that, and it's always changing. Okay. And we like to just say, hey, you need to be fully over here on the intrinsic side, you know, where it's just your passion. But yeah, there's a real world out there too. So you got to blend it. The summer is also where you got to delay that gratification, because you see that tomato out there that's almost ripe. You know, should I pick it now or should I wait? And you're going to get a better harvest if you wait. The fall gives you feedback on how your processes for the rest of the year did. And it's easy to be intoxicated by your own success and not start thinking about the next winter coming up. And it's easy to start thinking, do we really even need to have a winter season? We did so good this year. Should we just keep pushing and doing what we're doing? It seemed to work. Well, you don't know how the other team's doing either. So this is the time to, you know, be humble and step back and plan on that winter season. And it could be a short winter season. So, you know, the more you're prepared for that winter, the shorter it's going to be. So, but the timing is critical. And I'm going to show you a business model here. It's called the Sigmoid Curve. And you're not going to hear this in sports psychology at all, because I couldn't find it anywhere. This curve shows a learning phase, which shows a downward decline in performance. Let's just speak on performance kind of mindset. So performance is on the left side, and it's going down in the learning phase. But then it shifts back up, and that's the growth phase that we're just talking about. All the different seasons. And now you're to that harvest, and it could be your fourth or fifth harvest, and you've just continued up and everything is just going good. Well, this is the time to step back, like I said, and have that winter season. And it could be to start a new curve that's going to give you more growth than you ever could have thought of. But if you didn't do that, then you might hit that decline phase, or more likely you will, and now you're going downhill. And perhaps that happened to a lot of businesses right now during COVID. I know there's a lot of people surviving, and there's a lot of people that are thriving. So the ones that are thriving are perhaps the ones that had said, you know, we need to make some changes. And yeah, we went downhill in a learning phase again, and that hurt. That was that pruning, the green line as it goes down. And then it rapidly went up. So you always got to be thinking to make changes to your processes that could and more likely will facilitate more growth in the long term. And I like to say long term. You know, there's unrealistic things that happen like COVID. It's just a reminder that there's slowdowns and setbacks and obstacles, and you can't do anything about that. But this could be the opportunity to start that new Sigmoid curve in your organization. But nevertheless, over the COVID, for me, my focus has been on becoming stronger in all aspects. And I hope you've had good results as well. It's easy to get distracted by the news channels. And so I just avoid the news. Not that none of the news matters. It's just, I'm not going to let that be the focus of my day. I'm going to focus And oh, by the way, I'm in my climbing gym. This is not a false background. So I could jump up here on the wall. That's my sport that I started when I went back to school 4 years ago. And the growth mindset's built into here. You can see the mountains and different levels. And climbing teaches every aspect of sports psychology, I believe, that can be applied to any sport. And it's one of the most rapidly growing sports in the world. It's growing. People have the growth mindset who are climbers, and it's an Olympic sport now. So we talked about valleys and mountaintops earlier, but when you first start out in the spring and summer, it could be this slow momentum, but it's like a heavy freight train. Once you get it going, it's hard to stop it. Okay, and that can be a good thing for you, but you have to realize that just that slow downward, that momentum to try to get it going can be that learning curve that goes downward before it starts going back up. But the valleys are there for a reason, as I talked about earlier, as I've experienced on the Appalachian Trail. I'm an experiential learner, so if you are too, then go hit the trail somewhere, because the next step is what matters, or hit a climbing wall. If you're thinking about up here, when you're down over here, you're going to fall, because you got to focus on the next moment. And every aspect, like I said, of sports psychology can be applied, from breathing to imagery to self-talk. I threw this slide in this morning because I'd forgot to put it in, but there's going to be some undesirable plants that you have to cultivate sometimes. And the perfect analogy is my own career, because I was always told that, hey, you can't be a pilot because you wear glasses. But I would see pilots who wore glasses. So I never gave up, despite everyone saying, hey, you need to come up with something else to do with your life. And so I said, no, I want to be a pilot. So I had to go to navigator training out in California. And the base is no longer there in Sacramento. So I've lived out in California. And that was figuring out a way to maneuver around the system, because I went to navigator training and then I applied to pilot training, and I was able to get a waiver for my vision, and then I got right in. And then I was told, well, you wear glasses, you won't be a fighter pilot. Well, I flew F-16s for 17 years. So I disproved that myth. And so you got to be one who's willing to push. And when someone says no, that means yes. Okay, that means, okay, I'll just work harder. I'll figure out a way to get around that. Yes, it's painful sometimes. And it gave me a time to mature and develop, so that when I did go to pilot training, I did really well, because I already had been flying at 600 knots or 600 miles an hour, close to that or over, in the F-111. Anyway, you can tell if somebody's really committed, because I have people all the time say, man, I really wanted to be a pilot, but I couldn't because I was colorblind, or my vision was not good enough. And I'd always go, well, my vision was not good enough either. And right then, when they tell me I should have been, I wanted to be, and stuff like that, I go, you just weren't committed. Now, I don't tell it to their face, but in the back of my mind, I'm going, you're not a committed individual. And so you can read someone just by their commitment, and evidence has to be there, though. I know that kind of sounds kind of arrogant or cocky. I'm not trying to be that way. I'm just, it's just reality. Okay. Let's talk about some fertilizer for growth. You got to have stretch goals, okay, that stretch you beyond what you thought you could do. And if you're not stretching yourself, then you're just going to become stagnant. You got to use some risk management there as well, but you got to be able to push the edge. You always have to accept the consequences of failure. I like adventure, but if there's no risk in that adventure, then it's not adventure. There has to be some form of risk. And I'll throw this in because you've always got to work as a team as well. You can't just do it alone. Your successes in the long run are going to come because you were on a team. I mean, Coach John Wooden would not let Kareem Abdul-Jabbar become what he could have become as far as breaking records, because he said athletes or individuals break records, teams win championships, and he wanted to win championships, and he won 10 national D1 basketball championships. He's the only D1 coach who's ever won that many national championships. But it took him 16 years from the time he started at UCLA until he won his first national championship. And you tell me today how many coaches out there who can make it 16 years without getting fired because they didn't win a championship. But nonetheless, the best, this is through research, the best group size is 3 people for a task and 6 for social kind of functions. I just thought that was interesting. Especially when a basketball team is 5. But really, I wonder how many teams with just 3 could really do it. I don't know. Regardless, there's non-seasonal growth, okay? Some seeds, like I said, take 30 years to sprout. They need that right environment. They need to be mature. They need to be a navigator first before a pilot. There's things that might not be invented. I mean, when I was young, we didn't have rock climbing gyms because we hadn't invented all the materials that we can do to make all the handholds and footholds. And then all the rock climbing gear of today is totally different for outside climbing than it was 30 years ago. You know, it might take creativity. There's several different forms of intelligence. There's creative intelligence, analytical intelligence, and practical intelligence. And so if you're a coach and you got this analytical person who breaks everything down into components, but you got this creative person that has all these unique ideas, you got to take those and blend them. But regardless, you got to master your processes first, and you got to be patient. And you can have multiple seasons going on at different times with different athletes who are in different seasons, or you might have multiple seasons going on because you've mastered this process, but now you're working on a different one. And so they're in different seasons. And so you got to keep those prioritized. What if there's no growth realized? And this is going to lead me into the character strength survey. Because you've got to step back and take a good assessment of yourself and see what's real. You're not given the evidence. You've been patient, but you're not seeing any progress. Okay. And you don't want to be that person that quit as you're in that learning phase, but now you've gone through the learning phase and everyone else has really grown and just outperformed you. Maybe you're chasing the wrong dream. You got to be real with yourself. Have you aligned your goals and passions with your character strengths? Do you really have your plan written out on a card? I mean, it doesn't have to be the perfect plan. Like I said, the plan is always changeable. You don't fall in love with it. You might be fixed-minded, and now you got to really, take a hard look at yourself and say, hey, I need to make some changes. If you're not getting the results you want, then you need to be making changes. And if not, then you have to ask yourself, why am I not making changes? Did I harvest at the wrong time? And, you gotta learn the fundamentals first. You can't go from off the streets to flying an F-16. It takes years of training in other airplanes before you're even selected for that. And then you have to train even in that. And it was always training. Even when we were preparing for combat missions, before it started, we were training over in the desert. You might have skipped that winter season. You might not have the team or social support. You could be wandering without purpose or vision. I could go on and on with all these different reasons, but you get the point. The soil is important. This is your foundation, and I have, if you can see in my gym here in the back, hanging on the wall is this pyramid that you're seeing on your screen. And that pyramid rests on a foundation at the very bottom. Those bottom blocks, the 3 and the the three bottom blocks, friendship, loyalty, and cooperation, are relationship blocks. And then on the cornerstones is hard work and planning, and then enthusiasm. And that is at the foundation. That is the soil that you're going to plant your seeds in. And your character strengths are perhaps part of that foundation, as well as the mortar that holds those bricks together. John Wooden, there's a photo of him if you've never seen one of them. He's kind of an old looking dude. He lived to be 99, but he says you get the most joy out of the most difficult circumstances. I think that's the epitome of the growth-minded person, is they see joy in the difficult circumstances. I have to throw this in here because I think during this time in our country, this is a perfect example of two different people who loved each other and had different religions, and they dressed differently. On the left side is John Wooden coaching Kareem Abdul-Jabbar back in the 1970s. And Kareem, look how tall he is. I mean, he's just one of the greatest basketball players ever. But he's listening to one of the greatest coaches ever. And then on the right screen is in the last days of John Wooden, and he's holding hands. That is how we need to be, guys. Okay, what is your character? Who are you? You got to know what seeds you're planting. You're planting yourself. It's about personal growth. And if you don't know who you are, and you don't know where you're at, then, and you don't know where you're going and how you're going to get there, and then what are you going to do when you get to that point? They always say start with why. I say, man, you got to start with who you are and where you're at, and then where are you going, and then we can get into the why and the how and the what. And then when you get to the top, when I get to the top of this boulder problem in here, how am I going to get down without breaking my leg? You always have to have a plan when you get to the top. Okay, so character strengths are important. And this organization is called VIA. I'm not associated with them whatsoever. It's called Values in Action. That's what VIA means. And there's that action word again. You always have to be acting. So it's values and action. There's 24 character strengths. And I'll tell you that each of them have a symbol, and mine is perseverance, and there's a mountain. And when I discovered that perseverance was my number one character strength, I thought it was cool because I love mountains, and half my shirts have a mountain on them. And I was like, perhaps what you have in your home reflected on the walls and around your office or in your car or wherever reflects some of your character strengths. I don't know if that's researchable, but it's something to think about. But there's 24 character strengths, and there's no weakness in strength. So, your last strength could be kindness. That doesn't mean that you're not kind. It just means you use kindness in a different way. Okay. So you can go online, you can take this strength assessment. It takes 15 minutes, and it rank orders your strengths. And if you take your top 5 strengths and really hone in those and improve those, that's going to bring you better results to your processes. Your processes, plural form. Like I said, it's a starting point. It's an awareness function. This is related to mindfulness because you know who you are, and it helps you to know or understand where you're going as well. And there's the info about the top strengths. This is the most energizing to use and the most natural. Okay. Doesn't mean that your lower strengths are weaknesses. And you have to remember that when you take this assessment, that you don't see any negative. This is a form of positive psychology. Positive psychology is the umbrella over sports psychology. It's not traditional psychology. Traditional psychology is depression, anxiety, and working with things that are negative. Okay. Positive psychology is exactly what it is. It's about positive things. It's about what's good about you, not what's bad about you. That's make what's good about you even better and stronger. And that will dilute the weaknesses. And so you don't focus on the leak in the boat. You focus on, you fix the leak and then you sail on to a destination with extra strength. But if you're stuck in the past and focused on the patch for that leak, then you're not going to go anywhere. And so you see that, and that's called above and below the line. So when you're above the line is performance psychology. When you're below the line, one of the heads of the positive psychology movement worked for the APA for like a lot of years, and he said, as a psychologist, the best he could do for using traditional psychology is get that person to the 0 line. Where positive psychology gets people who are above the line even higher. And that's where I said a limitation or the negative to that is that it can make you so good that you become the thing. And that's when you go off the deep end, because you're not humble and you lose the big picture. Okay. Here's the link, but you can actually just Google via survey or values in action or character strength survey, and you'll find it. You have to register. They don't bother you with tons of emails all the time. Occasionally you'll get an email from them that's actually something really good that could help you during that season. So that's my pitch on the character strengths. But I want to leave you, we're at the 46-minute point. I want to leave you with an acronym. As a fighter pilot, we thought we had to use 3 and 4 letter words. They were acronyms because things are going by so fast, and I didn't have time to go heads down. You always had to be heads out and looking around and keeping your situational awareness as high as you could, and everything was on the stick and throttle. And the F-16 had a stick over here on the right, which was unusual. But I came up with this acronym to help me with sports psychology, and maybe it will for you as well. But it's called GRIT. And GRIT in itself is about long-term perseverance toward a goal. But GRIT as an acronym can stand for goal setting, where the process is the key. And regulation, last week we talked about mindfulness and deep breathing, which is a form of self-regulation. Self-regulation can reduce tension, but you can also use it to energize yourself. So we say, hey, you need to relax. I like to say we need to reduce excess tension, because you don't want to be too relaxed. Otherwise, you're not energized and ready for action. Imagery is the I in GRIT, and that's for the mental rehearsals and also seeing yourself being successful. And the F-16, we call it chair flying. So you could sit there and just visualize everything and go through all the different processes. But visualization is not just your eyes, but it's all 5 senses. Just remember that. You can always you got to kind of embrace all of it. The smell of the grass and the sweat, that smell of sweat maybe energizes you. So that's just an example of how you can add that to your visualization. Self-talk is your thoughts, positive or negative. They need to be facilitating the results and giving you evidence. We got one more slide on GRIT, but you got goals, that's your process, performance, and outcomes. And then you got to be able to regulate, that's self-control, have awareness and know how to breathe properly to get yourself to that ideal performance state. And then you got to imagine the future and the process and rehearse it often and master that process. And then T, you could use that to say transform, transform your thinking. Performance enhancing self-talk, there's 5 different levels of self-talk, but I no longer do, then it becomes I am doing this, and then it becomes it is. And that when it becomes it is, it's like one of the best forms of self-talk that is happening. It is occurring that I am successful and growing. And you want to avoid those negative I should have, I can't, those things. is pretty self-evident. As climbing, it's self-evident when you fall that you didn't do the process right. So goal setting: create it, own it, control it. Regulation: breathe it, live it, control it. Imagery: see it, feel it, embrace it, and control it. And then think it, say it, believe it, and then trust it. Okay. For any of my Spanish speakers out there, I'm still learning Spanish. I'm not that good. I've been working on it for years, since I was flying to Chile all the time. But the Pyramid of Success, I had this translated into Spanish, so that's available out there, and that's the English version there. And so that ends or concludes my briefing on the growth mindset. I know I've presented a lot of information and 50 minutes, and so there's probably not a lot of time for questions, but I'm open for them, and you can email me at any time, and I'll try to answer as quick as I can. But thank you so much for the opportunity to participate and be a part of your lives today. I know your time is valuable, and thank you so much, Marion, for allowing me to speak today.
Thank you, Ned. That was awesome. Can I ask you a favor? Maybe can you stop sharing your screen, and then we can ask if people want to put on their videos as well. So if you guys want to go back with your video view and even turn your sound on. If you have any question, we're going to get started here. We have a 5-10 minute for questions. Ed, I wanted to thank you for the presentation, and I have to say I really enjoy all of the different metaphors that you are using, because I think especially I don't coach anymore, but when I used to coach, it was always about using a different metaphor to get your message across. And one image is going to resonate with an athlete and another one is not, and so you sort of have to always change and pick something different. And you certainly have given us a lot of different metaphors and images that we can use, and I think that was really good. I do have one question, I guess, to get started, and if anybody wants to jump in afterwards, we can do that. You talk obviously about growth mindset, and I'm curious from your perspective, and maybe with your experience in as a pilot, but also as an instructor, how do you encourage the growth mindset? Like, how do you teach that to someone or to teenagers? I think from my experience of coaching, I feel like there's a portion, there's a time where the kids up until 10, 11 years old are really good at being in that space. Like they naturally try, they want to do different things. But then there comes these teenage years where they seem to be more concerned about self-esteem, they have less confidence, they worry about what other people think. And I think it's a critical time to continue to encourage the growth mindset. And this is also where you start seeing a change in terms of performance of athletes that will continue on the path of athletics or simply will leave because they can't take the failures or the criticism. And so I'm curious from your perspective how you would approach that.
Yeah, it's a really good question, and I know it's very debatable and could be controversial as well, because as a kid, it seems like a lot of youth sports, and this is coming from the literature and from my personal experience, is that a lot of kids could be in that sport because the parent has kind of put them and pushed them to become that kind of athlete because they're going to live vicariously through them. And then they become a teenager, and then, the fumes, either the gas fumes from the car or the perfume from the girl, distracts some of the boys. I know that was one of the limitations for Boy Scouts, is that when they reach that certain age, they're not interested in Scouts anymore. So it's the same thing in sports. There's I'm not going to change the subject, but it's related. But there's a thing called integrated neuromuscular training. and it's big in Canada. What they do is they start out kids with, they don't specialize in a sport as a young 5-year-old to like 12-year-old. They basically learn plyometrics, strength training, balance, flexibility, movement. It can all be related to rock climbing. Is how I got into thinking this is, but the Canadians are not necessarily using it for that, but they're focused in on developing those motor skills. And then when they're a teenager, then they specialize. One of the, well, there's two forms of teaching. You know, there's the child-centered and there's the teacher-centered. And it's the same thing as athlete-centered versus coach-centered. It's the same thing. When it's child-centered, then you're focused on what they're interested in and versus what you're interested in. And so that's really hard as a teacher. And my mom was a first grade teacher, and she embraced the child-centered approach. And I've been reading all her notes and literature after she passed away. I found all this in her desk. And it's most of our education system is a teacher-centered. You know, we're teaching the same thing to all the kids. Whereas the child-centered finds out this kid really likes science. So now I'm going to focus in on science. This kid likes baseball, so I'm going to focus in on working with him with baseball versus football. That also takes away from what I said a while ago about specializing. But I'm just saying you take what the child is interested in. So yeah, if they are interested in baseball, then you work on those developmental skills that apply to baseball, not necessarily the sport. So I don't know if that answers the question. But for a growth standpoint, if you're following your heart with a passion and you're letting the child determine their course of action, you know, as far as the destination they want versus what you want them to have, then you can help guide them and find the people to put in their lives that are going to make them stronger in those processes that will enable them to get to where they want to be. If that makes sense. Because like I said,
absolutely.
It's the same thing as me saying, hey, I really like airplanes. I want to be a pilot. I was building airplane models. I was doing all these things. And then people would say, no. It seems like we have a lot of dream killers in our society or throughout the world. And I see it today, even with my own child who's 21, and I have to pull her aside and I say, don't listen to that person. What they said is, I said, that person's a dream killer. Don't let what that person said kill your dreams. And so you got to keep the dream killers away from your processes and just let you go with the flow. Another thing is maybe focus in on studying these great coaches like Coach John Wooden. One of his books, this one is like, it's a Christian-based book, but it's very, very valid for any athlete, and it's pocket size. It fits in the back of a pocket, and it goes over each block of that pyramid. And I mean, famous athletes and coaches, Hollywood stars and Bill Gates and everyone else like in that category have used this pyramid. So maybe that's a way to get people, focused on one thing. There's this famous speech by this admiral, and he talks about getting up and making your bed each day. When you make your bed, it's like a dopamine response, and it makes you want to accomplish something else, and then it's a building block. So maybe, for me, if I go rock climbing, I start accomplishing things and I succeed and I met a goal, and that makes me want to go in the other room and succeed in a goal that's unrelated to rock climbing. Yep. There's all these little indirect things that can guide someone.
Absolutely. Well, and I think you really insisted on the positive side of psychology or your strengths and developing these. And I think, this is maybe the entrance point to encouraging and teaching the growth mindset in general, whether it's for children, teenager, or even, with regard to athletes. So when an athlete's retire and transition into a next career, a lot of the work that we do with the athletes is really teaching them to go back to that mindset, and not, you know, sometimes they've reached out the top and they get a little bit stuck at the end of their career on that top, and they forget to see the other side and switch perspective. So I guess maybe we can end on this today, is really, you know, staying positive and grabbing all these little positive elements in each of our lives, to build as building blocks to get better and have better performance. And you know, it's all about that long-term journey, not necessarily, like you said, watching the scoreboard, and but more the joy of enjoying the process. Like I said, I love your metaphors. I think that was super interesting. I will be sharing with everybody the different books that you've recommended, as well as the link to the VIA website, if people want to go and check out their strengths or do this with their athlete. And then Ned, thank you so much for taking the time to present and share your experience. We don't get to chat often with former pilots, so fighter pilots, that's amazing. I can't imagine having being under high pressure while fighting for your life. So quite impressive, and thanks for the presentation today. Much appreciated.
You're welcome. Thank you so much for having me.
Thank you, guys. Have a great rest of your week, and we'll see you next week. Thank you. Bye, Ned.
We'll see you later. Bye-bye.